Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And what on earth is this abomination of a composition? In today's match, we went head-to-head with Protection Paladin, Holy Priest, Fury Warrior. This composition is particularly nasty with an infinite, multiple amounts of answers to prevent themselves from dying, while also doing tremendous damage to just kind of overrun their opponents. And we had been losing to them every single game, every single day for a week until today. And it is with this strategy in today's video that I will be showing you what we did to be able to start succeeding against this composition that was such a menace. Our main strategy here is to target the priest and never get off of the Holy Priest. The secondary strategy is to make sure that we are rotating Hex, Cyclone, and Root onto the Protection Paladin and the Fury Warrior for the entire game. If there is a diminishing return, we need to use it, because if we don't, you can see we are going to get trucked. So we've Cycloned the Fury Warrior, we've used Imprison on their trinket, and we've Cycloned the Prop Paladin, isolating the Holy Priest and expending their mana to the largest degree. You want to be careful with Spell Reflect and remove Hex from your Shaman when it is landed. The Shaman really cannot waste any time trying to fake that with how much damage they have. You're going to need to play the 0 cooldown Hex talent if you're going to be able to find victory against this team. When your Shaman is crowd controlled, you want to be kiting in bear form and avoiding your opponents using your sprints, your dash, and your stampede, and your typhoon to avoid the enemy attackers, because if they get any uptime at all, you're going to die. If they are crowd controlled, you get to attack. If they're not crowd controlled, you better be hiding in bear form. You better be using wild charge and getting out of there as soon as possible. So the Protection Paladin and a Cyclone, we've activated Eclipse, we're dumping Star Surges, we've root beamed the Paladin, hexed the Warrior, and we're just going to continue to truck down the Holy Priest. Every other target ends up being a bit of a trap, and this is the best way to run the Holy Priest out of mana, and you're just going to have to avoid this insane composition for 10 plus minutes. So we've hexed the Paladin, knocked the Warrior off the side, isolated the Priest, but I see Dwarf Shadows from the Warrior, so I'm going to start moving away. We drop Earth Grab Totem to root the enemy attackers, and now we're looking for Cyclones. We Cyclone the Protection Paladin, removing them from play, both damage and healing. So we want to dump our Star Surges when the Prop Paladin can't support the Priest to get the Priest to waste as much mana as possible. We've imprisoned the Warrior, and then we switch that into a Cyclone while our Shaman is in a full fear, still using as many diminishing returns as possible onto the Warrior and Prot. We've rooted the Warrior, hexed the Prot, but unfortunately, look, we went on the DPS for a second there and broke CC. That's going to be a big mistake. You want to keep the Prot and the Warrior away from the Demon Hunter. You don't want that AoE from the Demon Hunter to break your roots or break your hexes. Here they're connecting with cooldowns, Recklessness, and Avenging Wrath. We need to be in bear form. We need to be using our Bull Rush, our Wild Charge. We need to try and escape. We get a Hex onto the Warrior. We can jump up over this ramp here and heal ourselves away from the Warrior and try and escape. As that Hex ends, I pull them behind the pillar, root beam the Paladin away from the Priest, as well as rooting the Warrior, and try and heal myself while my Shaman is silenced. But you can see, even just for a second, half of my health is gone. If they get any sort of uptime, which they can get plenty with this composition, it's really nasty comp at the moment. If you're looking for something to really just climb some rating at the lower ranks, I would definitely recommend you try this Prop Paladin Fury Warrior Holy Priest comp. You just run in, do damage, and you basically can't die, and you're getting 100% uptime. Here we've Typhooned and Hexed and rooted them away from ourselves, which means now we can dump Star Surges onto the Holy Priest. We've cloned the Prop Paladin out of the root, preventing them from assisting the Priest, which has now burned the Priest's mana down to about 19,000 at this point. We're staying out of line of sight of the Warrior's charge while still just dumping Star Surges into the Priest. Full Hex on the Paladin. We're going to pop our Incarnation and get as much damage as we can so that the Priest has to heal and not the Prot. We've rooted the Warrior into a Cyclone at the pillar while rooting the Prot away, and here Apotheosis is up, but we're still just going to focus on crowd controlling to full diminishing return, root the Warrior, but now Shaman's in a Hodge. They've used Magic Bob, this orange icon, and this is the scariest point in the game. When you see this on the Warrior, you know you're in trouble because they're immune to all magic CC. So I'm going to go into bear form, and we're going to try and tank them. We put Earthen Wall Totem down. We can use Bark Skin during this time, and we end up using Darkness, and it's usually because the Darkness will line up with this Magic Bop, and this is when you can't escape or crowd control, so it's a good time to use your most powerful defensives. We've Cycloned the Warrior, and we've root beamed the Prot, isolating the Priest, so now we want to dump our Star Surges as soon as possible, hexing the Paladin out of the root beam, and then stunning the Warrior, focusing as much crowd control as possible, then hexing the Warrior, knocking them away so they can't charge while they're hexed and getting some distance, using Stampede to keep my Shaman and myself towards the Holy Priest, who's now down to 11,000 mana at about the 5-minute mark. And again, you're going to need to get into a little bit of dampening for this, but they change their strategy. They start going after the Shaman. So if they're attacking the Shaman, I'm going to have to help. We're going to Cyclone the Warrior, Innervate and Regrowth, root the Warrior off, and Cyclone the Prot. Now we've isolated the Priest here, so we would like to be attacking, but I'm going to Cyclone the Warrior on Door of Shadows to try and get my Shaman a little bit of extra time. Plus, the Priest has Aegis up anyways, so it's not going to be too big of a deal. We can root the Paladin, dump in a couple of Star Surges towards the Priest, who's now casting Mind Control. We've imprisoned the Warrior. Would maybe be better to save the Imprisoned for when the Shaman is stunned. That's going to be a lot more scary of a moment in the match. But then we've rooted the Warrior out of it. He gets freedom, so we're going to want to use Cyclone as soon as possible. Get a Cyclone onto the Warrior, toss a Regrowth onto the Shaman, because even if they're getting any time, like that was just a prop Paladin that Hodge, and our Shaman dipped to like 50% health. Now we're going to root beam the Paladin and Star Surge the Priest, and you're basically treating the Paladin like the healer, and then the Holy Priest is just a tunnel target that you're just going to do whatever you can for damage. Clone the Prot out of Root Beam, Hex the Warrior, everybody's crowd controlled, dump Star Surges, go after the Holy Priest. Your Demon Hunter is just a Terminator running them down for the entire duration of the match. Now they're getting uptime on my Shaman. I want to start helping here. We've got Cyclone diminishing returns to the Warrior, but I'm getting chastised and I'm getting crowd controlled. So it's important when they're tunneling your Shaman that your Shaman uses Tremor Totem for the DPS when it's available to get us out of fear, because they're not going to be a fear target, and we need to get out of CC to help them as soon as possible. Now they're silenced, so we're gonna Cyclone the Prot and root the Warrior with Mass Entangle, heal our Shaman up while the Priest isn't in our line of sight, and really just focus on utility. Decurse these reflected hexes as soon as possible. Cyclone the Prot to full diminishing return, and we're waiting for that diminishing return onto the Warrior. So we're going to imprison the Warrior. We've used our Astral Shift here, anticipating the stun. We're going to root the Prot while the Priest is stunned, try and get them out of the game as much as possible, and then we can start looking for Cyclones here, because the Warrior is off diminishing return. We Cyclone the Prot out of the root. We clone the Warrior. We've isolated the Priest again. We wait for Intervene, activate Eclipse, dump all of our Star Surges, go for the kill, use our in-cap roar on these immunity angels. It's going to prevent the immunity effect onto whoever that angel targets, so I've saved my in-cap roar for that. I notify my teammates that the enemies are on diminishing return. Here we're in trouble, stunned into silence. We need to drop Spirit Link Totem. This is the Avenging Wrath of the Prot. Again, this is when you want to be thinking about using your big cooldowns. Avenging Wrath Prot, Power Infusion, or the Magic Bop, so using a link there is more than fair. We're going to root up the Warrior into a Cyclone, get them out of the game, because even with just a Prot hitting our Shaman, he had him at like 30%. Here we get triple feared. Not a good idea. I think our Shaman needs to maybe avoid standing near us, or at least near the Demon Hunter again, because the crowd control is going to break and it's stacking us up for fears. But we're going to root the Prot. We get freedom. We knock the Prot away into a full hex. Now we can root the Warrior. We've got the Priest completely out of mana. We have our biggest cooldowns coming up in just a second, so we just need to live a little bit longer. So emergency time, drop the darkness. We're getting into dampening. Cooldowns are going to start to become desynced. We just need to stay alive at this point. We can chain darkness into Earthen Wall Totem if we need to. We pop all of our cooldowns. We get Trinket Fade and Bubble from the Paladin. This team is in a lot of trouble. 0 mana left for the Priest at this point in the game. We get Magic Bop defensively, that orange icon on the Priest, so just keep crowd controlling the enemy attackers. Don't get overconfident. Don't forget to keep juggling your CC, because as soon as these guys are out of crowd control, they are just going to destroy you. So we've rooted the Warrior, hexed the Paladin, stunned the Priest, isolated the Priest, dumped all of our Star Surges, root beamed the Paladin to stop them from off healing, and we've used Tremor to break fears throughout all of this. We need to Cyclone the Prot. Now there's no healing. I tell my Shaman, stay away from the Prot. That's where the stun is. You want to avoid the Prot stun at this point as long as possible. While we've got the Priest out in the open, we might be able to secure the win in the game here. He runs in line of the Prot and then pre-walls, trying to anticipate the stun. So then I Cyclone the Warrior and we execute the kill onto the Holy Priest just in the nick of time. We get a Hex onto the Prot Paladin just for good measure. Again, you still want to be juggling CC. I've Cycloned the Warrior, stunned the Prot, and the main reason for this is because you can still die, even just the Warrior and the Prot. I don't know what it is about these classes. It's almost like Prot does as much damage as Ret while having 5 extra bubbles on top of it, but you need to be really careful. You're never safe against this composition. It is a nasty one to deal with. So even here, when it's 2 versus 3, we don't have a lot of defensive cooldown, so it's like I can attack right now, but I'm a bit worried his health's going to suddenly spike down. So I see that he's interrupted, and you know what, we're going to stun. Oh, he's silenced. I'm going to Cyclone. I'm not fooling around with this. Cyclone the Prot, heal myself, go after the Warrior, Cyclone the Warrior Trinkets. We're at 30%. I'm going to Cyclone the Warrior again. I'm not messing with this. In-cap roar on the Angel, stop it from using its immunity effect, root the attackers, Trinket, root beam, and we can finally finish the match. This was a composition, I say again, that had been basically farming us for the past week, and we decided to execute on this crowd control strategy, and we're finally able to pull off a win, but you can see it was still close. This is a nasty one. Prop Paladin, Fury Warrior, Holy Priest. But thank you very much for watching the video today. If you enjoyed it, please leave it with a thumbs up and subscribe. Comment down below with your thoughts. How is your rank 1 push going? How's your end of the season push going? What are you trying to achieve before all of these titles, mounts, and transmogs are gone forever? But other than that, thank you once again, and I will see you in the next video.